I want to talk for a minute about digital card games. And this is coming from somebody who's played a lot of Hearthstone and a good bit of Magic the Gathering Arena. And to just go ahead and give my bona fides for the years gone by, I used to practice a lot on Dueling Nexus back when that existed, Dueling Book back when that's still kind of a thing people use right now, especially for GOAT format. I also have been playing on Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel for as long as I can stomach it. Have played a lot of Magic Arena, have played a lot of the Pokemon Online TCG, though that's probably one of the best implemented versions of a card game I've played. I've also played on MTGO, not for very long, as that's a very clunky interface, and I kind of sort of hate it a lot. But I want to talk about digital card games. Card games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic, and Pokemon that enter the arena of the online marketplace, and also card games like Hearthstone and Legends of Runeterra that are exclusively online. So, are these great things? Are these like just fun extensions for everybody to play? I mean, yeah, sure. Kind of. If your card game is monetized in the way that, say, Magic Arena is monetized, I would say that marketplace is very predatory for a new player. While the argument could be made that you can get every card on Magic Arena for free by being a free-to-play player and then doing well in draft tournaments, I have to go ahead and put a stopper on that. You have to do well first, and there is no new player who is doing well at any draft. A new player does not know of the actual, they don't know what makes a good card. They don't know which cards to grab during a draft. And they most certainly, once they have a deck built, don't know how to play it efficiently enough to get 7 wins. Now, Hearthstone is a little more lenient in this case. It is a little cheaper to do its version of a draft, the arena run, but the downside is that you don't get to keep the cards in there. And likewise in Runeterra, you don't get to keep cards when you do their version of arena either. And theirs honestly takes infinitely longer to do than either of the other versions that are here to be talked about. As far as I can tell, Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not have a variant of this. It just merely has a Battle Pass style system. And we don't know what Pokemon's going to have in the future because apparently the Pokemon TCG game, as it exists online right now, is a temporary endeavor. Now, let's talk about what a card game is, if you don't know, and why that matters. And I'm not doing this to throw definitions out for the purpose of the video in general. I'm going to kind of get to a point. A card game, not like Uno, not like something like poker, but a trading card game is meant to be a game where you collect a series of cards and then use them to assemble a variety of decks to play with your friends or in tournaments against people in competitions with high or low stakes. There is a major component to these kinds of card games that has been in since the dawn of them with things like early Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, and that is the tradability aspect. The ability to have a grouping of cards and for those cards to have a particular value, because if I am looking at another player across the table and I don't need this Llanowar Elf in my collection, they might need it for their deck, and I might need their Vampiric Tutor. And let's ignore the fact that they would be very stupid to hand me a Vampiric Tutor for a Llanowar Elf. Let's ignore that for a minute and talk about the fact that at least the cards have a value. And for somebody who's going to go into the comment section and say, hey, no they don't, it's all made up. The value of money is also made up. It's a socially constructed thing. Literally, currency is socially constructed. So let's kick that can all the way down and ignore that comment before it comes up, because it will come up. Cards have a particular value. If I buy a booster pack of cards, even though, yes, it is most certainly gambling, I have a grouping of tangible items in my hand that I can use at any point in time. But it's it's not going to be a surprise to anybody that brick and mortar businesses in general, for the most part, are kind of going the way of the dinosaur. I don't like this, but it is getting harder to run a brick and mortar business. I mean, in general, it's more expensive to run one of those than an Etsy shop. It's more expensive to run a TV station than it is to run a YouTube channel. It's more expensive to run a grocery store than it is to run a warehouse where you just send everything out via delivery. It is infinitely cheaper to run everything from from either atomized or centralized locations. As a result, brick and mortar stores are going by the wayside. Because of this, a lot of card game companies like Konami, like Game Freak, like Wizards are taking all their card games and moving them digitally. Now, Wizards and Pokemon for the longest time did have an online game, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Had an online card game variant ages ago where you paid per duel, and duel passes gave you cards as well as giving you a set number of duels. It was a very stupid system, but there's been variants of these systems for the longest time. But there's something lost here. There's the obvious point that I've made right now, which is that cards having a certain value only really matters in a physical space. In a digital space, it's harder for those values to stay what they are. I mean, hell, digital goods in Magic the Gathering Online have had depreciating values for a decent bit of time now. Moreover, the Pokemon economy is built almost entirely on the backs of rotating cards and the relevancy of booster packs, which will always have depreciating value because Pokemon is a rotational game. Cards exist for a year or two, and then they are taken out of the game. Crimson the DM, thank you for renaming your points for an oh well. But in general, cards just do not retain their values in those environments. But that's one half of the problem. Here's the other half. How do you play a card game on Magic Arena, on Pokemon TCG, on Hearthstone, or on Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel? It's roughly the exact same way on all of these different games. You go into a queue system and you hop in an unranked or a ranked ladder and you play against people of varying skill levels or of the same skill level if the game has a well-implemented ELO or background MMR system. Now, why is this a problem? When you're playing a game in that environment where there is nobody interacting with you, when it's a game that is designed from the get-go to be a thing that is played on a table with other people, it very quickly becomes a demonstration in grinding a game as opposed to playing it for your own personal enjoyment. If I had to sit down and grind 1,000 games of modern Magic the Gathering, I would probably pull my hair out. I mean, I can only see Ragavan so many times in a game before I want to scream. I don't want to hop into Pokemon Standard and just want to play my Lapras deck and have to grind up against Zacian Unity and other various decks that I will encounter in that format. But if I'm sitting at a table in front of a person, now we can have a conversation. This is a medium where I can meet people, where I can talk with people, where I can be a part of a community. Now, this is a card game for the sake of facilitating a social gathering. This is one of the reasons why the most popular format in Magic the Gathering right now is Commander. There's something lost whenever we just play digital. And this is not something that can just be replicated by having a chat room available for play. Believe me, we've had those options available on YGO Pro and Dueling Book for the longest time. That does not make things better. That screen in between me and the other player significantly changes the social dynamic of the situation. In many ways, it can make the situation more antagonistic. If you've existed online in any way, shape, or form for the last 10, 15 years, you've probably noticed a trend that it's a lot easier to be aggressive with people online than it is in real life. In real life, we read social cues. We are more cognizant of the end results of our actions, of the words we say. We are worried about the people around us hearing the things we say if we try to make a disparaging remark. And this leads to another issue. Not only do you not get the same social experience out of playing a card game on the computer as you do in real life, but there's another social aspect to card games in real life, and that is their economies. Now, I'm not just talking about the value of the cards you buy and the fact that they are constantly depreciating when you're picking them up online, and that is the nature of how they function. I'm talking about physically having a collection. Let's say that I want to get somebody into playing Magic the Gathering Standard, and I tell them the best way to get into that is to play Magic Arena. They'll boot up the game, and they will have access to no cards, except the starting variety of cards they give you. And I can teach this person how to play. I can teach this person how to draft. I can interact with them on a handful of levels, but when it comes to actually playing with them, they will always be behind me unless they invest a significant amount of money and time. Whereas if I happen to be playing a game of Magic physically with somebody, I could be sitting at a commander table and they could say, hey, I want to learn how to play, and I can hand them my Elf Ball deck. It's not going to be hard for them to play, and they'll be able to identify what most of the cards do because they have very non-complicated effects like tap for X amount of green mana. Almost every card in the deck will operate that way. I can curate a very easy to understand version of the game for somebody to learn, and we can sit down and play physically, and then at the end of things, if I'm handing them stuff out of the bulk of my collection, stuff that I really don't care about, I can then say at the end of that interaction, keep that deck. Continue playing it. If you enjoy the game, make it better as you go. Now, I know that when you're playing something like Magic the Gathering Online, you do have a way to facilitate trades in that game that allow something like this, but again, this is nowhere near the same. You're having to jump through a ton of hoops with that, and if you're a new player, Magic the Gathering Online is not going to be a very good way for you to play that game. That version of the game asks you to memorize every way in which a card functions and its triggers in ways that we just communicate via shorthand when we're playing the game physically. Now, there is a note in the chat saying, so what is needed is an online card game that is devoid of a profit motive. That is not going to solve the problem. Arena's economy is a problem, but it is not the problem. There are versions of these card games that exist with no profit motive at all, or versions that exist that are have incredibly healthy economies. Like, you can play Legends of Runeterra officially, and it has a very healthy card game economy that doesn't require you to invest any money at all, and you can get every single card in the game for not really that much time spent. Likewise, you could probably just play on Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro, one of the various forms of that open source software that exists right now. You could play on Dueling Book, and on either of these platforms, you have access to all the cards from the minute you start playing. And if you're playing Magic the Gathering, you can play something like Cockatrice, or Cockatrice, however you want to pronounce it. There's ways of playing these games in unofficial forms that allow you to have every single card in the game and just play that way. And that's a thing you can do, but then we run into the other issue, ownership. Now, I know that there's going to be probably at least one NFT bro that comes in and goes, you know, this problem gets solved by the blockchain. Shut up. No, it doesn't. The idea of ownership of something digitally is never going to replace the idea of owning something physically when it is something that was designed from the get-go to be owned physically. When it comes to trading cards, there is a tactile feel to handling those cards. There is a mechanical feeling to moving through a collection that cannot be properly simulated when you are just online. And again, the physical feeling of handing a new player their first deck is something that can't be replicated by opening up a client and scanning through a set of digital pictures. as companies like Wizards of the Coast, like Konami, like Game Freak move their games onto digital platforms, there are benefits that exist on those platforms, and I understand those benefits, especially in the middle of a pandemic. It's easier for people to be able to play their games online. There are people who have incredibly awkward social dynamics that if they want to enjoy their game, but they can't muster up the spoons to go out and deal with people, then online games are a wonderful way of them handling that, especially online card games. That way they don't have to sacrifice the kind of game they're playing. They're just sacrificing the environment they're playing it in. I understand there are benefits to this. I'm not saying destroy online variants of card games. But there is a trend that I want to know that's maybe a little upsetting. And I've seen this trend mostly with Magic, but I expect to see it more in the future if things keep going the way they're going. As the ubiquity of the brick-and-mortar business continues to diminish and local game stores struggle harder and harder to find their mark, and as companies like Wizards of the Coast do things like, sell cards on Amazon.com instead of selling them exclusively through game stores and local shops, making those shops both reliant and also in competition with Wizards of the Coast, and also allowing Wizards to directly sell cards through things like the Secret Lair system that will always be only on the Wizards of the Coast website and will never be granted to individual card shops for the ability of them to sell. I don't know. Maybe it seems to me like there's a trend of basically burying local game stores under the weight of having to compete with the monoliths of card games, whether they happen to be moving most of their customer base online or whether they happen to be selling directly to their customer base, cutting out the local game store in the process. I'm not a huge fan of this, and there's other practices that I'm not a huge fan of either when it comes to fighting card games in the physical space. Konami historically has been very antagonistic towards things like the GOAT format for Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm not saying greatest of all time, I'm saying Yu-Gi-Oh! Circa 2006 based on scapegoat control decks. The most love Konami gave to players who were playing that format was the Legendary Collection Kaiba, which reprinted one of the staple cards of the format, Delinquent Duo. And past that, they've done nothing. Magic the Gathering, where Wizards of the Coast is concerned, has done things like not properly curated their modern format. And when presented with the option between $20 commander decks and $40 commander decks, have decided to stick with the $40 decks, despite the fact that functionally they were about the same power level as the $20 decks, making it harder for paper players to get into the game in a way that is actually enjoyable for them. I don't know. A lot of these practices seem to be aimed at curating customers in a way that I am not a huge fan of. I'm not a huge fan of the online ubiquity of these card games anymore. They don't give the same feeling when it comes to playing, and they don't give most players what they want when they're playing. A lot of players who play card games aren't just playing them for the competition, for the ability to grind platinum and gold trophies in digital formats. They're collecting physical collections of cards. They are socializing with physical people in meat space. If card game companies, most notably, again, Wizards of the Coast, continue to screw over local game stores, there could be a point in the future where we lose them. I don't see why we have to have Wizards in direct competition with local game stores. I don't see why push for online-only card games cannot be properly integrated with their physical counterparts. Pokemon is going to be launching a new digital card game here soon, and I have no idea if they're going to continue using the booster pack system that exists in the original game. Now, while understandably, there's an issue with Pokemon cards always depreciating in value when they are not from super old sets, because they only have a standard format where cards will always depreciate in value, you run into the secondary problem. Sorry, I had to pause for a second because my stomach decided to do something. You run into the secondary problem where Pokemon also happens to be the trendsetter in a major way where card games are concerned. And that is in how they handle their booster pack and their sealed product. Something that Magic the Gathering could certainly learn a little bit from, and I would hope that Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel would take a look at as well. You see, when you buy a Pokemon pack, you get a code that can be used on the current online version of the Pokemon card game, and that code allows you to have a booster pack in that game. That code can also be used to redeem a pack that, instead of being opened, can be traded with another player for other cards. If you buy 30 packs in real life, you can then trade those 30 packs to people on the actual game for cards that you desperately need. Now, Master Duel seems to be using a one booster pack to rule them all system, where there's a single type of booster pack you buy, and then anytime you buy it, you unlock key cards that allow you to get packs from certain archetypes, where they are the same one pack, but 4 cards of the pack will be a little closer to the archetype you're actually trying to build. And that is a very neat innovation based on the amount of cards that exist in Yu-Gi-Oh! That are playable. It's a very neat and cool way to actually run things, but it runs into another problem. So I didn't know the trading mechanic neat. Yeah, that's a thing you can do in Pokemon. It's a thing you can technically do in Magic the Gathering Online. Here is my preferred system. Going forward, I would like that all of these digital card games, at least the ones that have a real space counterpart, Hearthstone and Legends of Runeterra obviously cannot do this. But card games that do have a real space counterpart, I think any sealed product that is bought should have a code that is redeemable online so that you can have essentially what looks to be a copy of your collection over there, at least in terms of the amount and scale of cards you have. That would be my preferred. I would also prefer if things like the secret layer drops, as much money as they make, would be offered to local game stores exclusively, not just available on Magic the Gathering's website and then potentially available for the game stores as well. I don't think that Wizards of the Coast should be in direct competition with the stores that are required for their game to function. Without local game stores, you do not have areas for people to play Magic the Gathering. Playing Magic in your local friend group and doing things like Commander is not sustainable enough for the card game environment. You need public spaces where people are able to continue to do their thing. If you continue to shaft your paper game and keep them in completely separate and disparate spaces for the purpose of getting your profit twice, then you are going to see people slowly slide out of the paper game in favor of digital because of its convenience, despite its drawbacks. On top of that, you're going to see the issue of card game stores, where you could be doubling down anyway. If people are buying booster boxes from local game stores, then those booster boxes would have codes to redeem stuff for the online game. And so you have people who probably wouldn't play your online game beforehand have all these codes they can use to now play online as well and have a collection that they can run. This doesn't solve all the problems, mind you. I still can't hand a random friend of mine from work a deck in Magic Arena. That problem will probably never be solved because the trading aspect of the trading card game was completely taken out. This is also ignoring the fact that cards get eroded in Magic the Gathering on Arena for no reason. Remember Omnath? Yeah, that's not a thing anymore. I don't know. Every single online card game has some way of dealing with the problems of online card games, but I don't think any one of them has found a good way to significantly curb the issues that exist in online space when it comes to trading card games. At the end of the day, the best way to play these games will always be in front of another player. I'm hoping we can one day be in a world where the online versions of these games are less predatory and are not as much of a problem and do not have as many drawbacks as they currently do. And I hope that the places that we actually play the game in real space will not slowly be eroded by the companies that rely on them. That's just me. Data Black Sheep says, wouldn't that have the problem of people buying cases and boxes, basically find the valuable cards without opening every pack and selling the unopened packs? That already exists in every card game. And there are ways to solve that problem in every card game. A long time ago, Magic the Gathering had paper booster packs that you could shine a light through to actually see the cards in. Like, that problem got solved a decently long time ago where Magic was concerned. With Yu-Gi-Oh, people used to actually weigh and scale their packs, and that was an issue as well. But as far as wouldn't that end up having the problem of people buying cases and boxes, find the valuable cards without opening every pack, none of that changes by having a code card in a pack. Any issues that exist in a particular card game with finding cards like that will exist irrespective of the code pack. How do they weigh them and why? Simple. You used a jewel scale. You would take a jewel scale, a digital one, you would go into a local Walmart with blister packs, and you would weigh all the blister packs. And you would either find the blister packs that weighed significantly more than the other packs, or the ones that weighed significantly less. The packs that weighed significantly more tended to have foils, and the packs that weighed significantly less tended to have ultimate rares because they were printed on thinner cardboard. Whereas the median range, where pack density was concerned, where pack weight was concerned, was usually where nothing of worth was found. Yeah, that's the thing. Those issues will always exist in card games. But we can actually make card games better by having our cards basically digitally move over, share our collections between the two, and not screw over the spaces where I can hand people, decks to actually play and learn. That's just me. What do you think in the comment section below? Are you more of a digital card game player? Do you prefer playing games in meat space? How and do you recognize any of these issues? Do you think they're issues, or do you think I'm very much off base? Moreover, if you want to see more videos about me bitching about card games, let me know. With that said, thank you for listening, and as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. If you want access to behind-the-scenes content for the channel, please consider checking out my Patreon. I do weekly vlogs over there, where I give real-life updates to what's going on behind the scenes on the channel, stuff that you don't really get over here, and even on Twitch. Patreon also helps the channel's stability a whole lot. Without Patreon, I wouldn't be able to do this at all. Especially with the kind of content that I do, neither YouTube nor Twitch are the most stable sources of income. If you are a $20 and up patron, then you will be featured on the ending slides as shown in the beginning of the end credits. If you want to catch the streams where all this content comes from, then consider heading over to Twitch and following. And if you want to continue watching over here on YouTube, maybe consider clicking one of the end screen videos. And once again, I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me over on my channel. I wouldn't be able to do literally anything that I'm doing over here on YouTube without each and every one of you. So thank you.